Hello, I am here with championship NASCAR driver Julia Landauer, a keynote speaker at the University of New Haven's Women's Leadership Conference today. Julia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, what brings you to the university today?
So the Women's Leadership Conference looked so cool when I started reading about it a few months ago, and I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to come and be the closing keynote. I think that talking with such a cool audience, and it's fairly diverse in terms of students and faculty and community members, and there are definitely some men in the crowd, so it's always fun to be able to kind of share my messaging and some of the tips I have and some of the lessons I've learned with a really nice audience, so I'm excited.
Why is it important for you to speak at these events?
So I have always been very privileged that my parents supported me in what I did. They were really great educators in terms of life lessons, and I've been able to pursue racing, and I love it, and I feel that I have learned so much and had the opportunity to have resources about, how women are treated differently than men, research that's been done. And with all of this knowledge and experience, I feel like if I can give back and if I can encourage people to be their best selves and to help give some of the tools that they might need, get that kick in the butt to go after it, I think that's something I'm obligated to do in a good way, in a positive way that I really want to.
So speaking of NASCAR,
Yeah.
you are a very accomplished woman, just like to name a few things. You were the youngest female champion at the Skip Barber Racing Series at 14 years old. You are the highest finishing female in the NASCAR K&N Series. You've done so much, like the list goes on. How does it feel to be so accomplished at such a young age?
It's really cool. It gave me the confidence early on that I could pursue it, but at the same time, it also keeps me really hungry. It's like, all right, I've done that, but now I want to do this. Now I want to, give Jimmy Johnson a run for his money and be, 8-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. But it's been great, and it's been really cool to have incredible teams around me the whole time and really learn how to be a good team player as well as a leader, and to get everyone motivated. And going fast is awesome, and winning is awesome, and I think that's part of the message that I like to share, especially with young women, that it's really okay to love winning, and I think it's not something that we're encouraged to say very much. And I mean, that's kind of life, though, whether it's a little victory or a big victory. That's what we're all going after in some capacity and on some scale. So kind of owning how cool the process is, I think, is really important.
So how did you get started in NASCAR?
So my parents got me and my siblings into go-karts when I was 10, and originally it was just so that we could do something together as a family on the weekends, but then also so that their girls could compete against boys. So I fell in love with it. I wanted to keep doing it. I knew very early on that I wanted to pursue it professionally, and my parents helped me. And I started racing in the NASCAR style of racing on ovals when I was 16, and I'm 26 now, so I've got now quite a few years in this. I still think of it as like my new form of racing. And then when I was 23 in 2015, I won a NASCAR track championship at a local level. But it was still, showed that I could do it as my first year out of college. So it proved, all right, full-time back at it, I can go be a champion again. So I've been climbing kind of through the minor leagues of NASCAR, basically, and the next step will be the first professional series in the NASCAR Truck Series.
Did you see yourself coming this far when you started racing go-karts, or even when you were doing the small stuff at 16?
I'll be honest, I think I see myself getting a little bit further. I think that I have learned that if you have that incredible determination and luck and the right opportunities, you can really accomplish a lot. And for me, I always looked up to these heroes that race at the top levels and who are able to perfect their craft week in and week out. And I feel like I haven't quite made it yet, and so for me it's like constant work in progress, trying to do better, but I'm really proud of what I've been able to do so far.
So as a woman in NASCAR, I'm sure that you've been the only female in the room sometimes, or you've heard some unpleasant things. How do you deal with that? And when it first happened, what was your reaction?
Yeah, that's such a hard-hitting point, and I think important to talk about, because I didn't realize it until after the fact, but when I was 12 and I was starting to race national go-karts, I just won a track championship as a go-karter, and we were approaching teams for go-karting, so basically like the professional of go-karts, right? And no one wanted to work with me because I was a 12-year-old girl, and they just didn't want to. And I didn't realize that until years later, but then a guy who saw my raw talent and my potential and believed in me, he came on and we basically built a team so that he could give me the support that I needed. And we were really successful. And so knowing that I have to work really hard, but that when I can find those male allies that really help, I think that's so important. I think that's a message that I will continue to discuss. But it's always jarring, and it's jarring when you know that you've worked hard, that you've prepared, that you are as good, and then to get negative responses from people. I think the hardest thing that I've had to deal with is joining a new team, regardless of what my resume looks like. I think people still don't really expect the woman to be a winner. And if they don't believe that you're going to win, they might not put in that extra little effort that could make the difference between a first place and a fifth place car. So once I've earned that respect, I think the teams that I've been on have thought, wow, like, I see what she's up against, I see the obstacles she's facing, and she's a team player and she wants to win. And then I have incredibly loyal respect. And so it's an uphill battle, but it's really rewarding when I get it. So yeah.
Have you seen the climate change at all? The response to you in general? And do you think that you've been kind of a trailblazer in helping change that?
Yeah, I definitely think we're seeing some changes, and there are more women and girls in the grassroots levels of racing. There aren't in the top levels of NASCAR anymore, but there are a lot in the grassroots, and I think that just changes the narrative. If there's 2 or 3 women out of the 20 to 30 driver field, like that's a really good percentage for us. And so I think it just normalizes having women, whether they're similar or different, just it normalizes it, and I think that's great. I think that I have been able to show that you can be, an approachable, fun to be around, and still very serious competitor, and that's been really great. And yeah, but we're also seeing more women in the engineering roles and kind of the behind the scenes as the mechanics, crew members, and so I think it's slowly but still starting to change.
So speaking of engineering, you did get your Bachelor of Science in Science and Technology. Why?
Great question.
Why take that route?
Yeah, so I made the decision to go to college, and I got in and I went to Stanford. And a lot of drivers will get homeschooled or just not go to college, but part of my decision was, one, as a person, I knew I had to develop and grow, and that would make me a better racer. I also recognized how business-oriented NASCAR is and how you need to get sponsorship to go racing. And so from a business side, I knew I had a lot to learn. And then from a technical side, I knew, racing is a technology-centric sport. And so the more knowledgeable I was from a technical standpoint, the better I'd be able to articulate what I need out of the car. And for me, that was really good. And I wanted to know what computer science was like. I wanted to know how to properly design things. And so I was able to have a broad enough major that I could dabble in a lot of different things. And I'm so glad that I was able to,
Has it been very helpful for you to understand the mechanics of?
Yes, yeah. And the car, the mechanics of the car change throughout the race, and the conditions that we're racing in change, from where the sun's positioned to how the tires are doing to what the equipment's doing. And so being able to be kind of analytical about what the car needs to continue going fast, in addition to what I feel, is a really good combination to have.
And has that made you a better racer, do you think?
I think so. I would have to assume so. Yeah, I don't have concrete evidence, but I assume it has made me better.
So as one of the few women in NASCAR and, women in the STEM field, the amount is growing, but it's still kind of a smaller group. How does it feel to be representative of that? And do you feel pressure to kind of bring something new to the table, or are you just like really proud to be a part of that?
It's a really cool position to be in, and it's cool to be able to use my platform and to help inspire other people and to help educate about, okay, maybe these are some of the things we could work on to make it a more open space for those less represented. I think that there is sometimes pressure to kind of fit a certain mold of what it is to be a woman in STEM or a woman in racing, and I have found myself feeling like I need to please a lot of people's expectations, and being able to remind myself, like, hey, do what you like to do.
Yeah.
Like, I really like STEM is something I advocate for, but I'm not a natural sciences person, right? And I never will be. And so feeling like it's okay to say that, and it's okay to focus on what I like and not really what other people expect, keeps me sane. And I think a lot of people who are in these positions of, notoriety, or they have a platform that they can use, like, you don't want to be pushed into a certain image, and so it's a tough balance. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to hear from like a young fan or a girl who might have been following you through your career and it's like, wow, I really love seeing her race?
Oh, that's a cool question. So one of the most flattering things, it's not really what someone said, but there was a girl who was about 6 or so who went to the races every weekend when I won my championship in 2015. And the following year, she dressed up as me for Halloween.
Aww.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like someone sees me as that kind of role model, and that it gives me a lot more responsibility, but it also means that it's important. It reinforces that what I'm doing is right, and what I'm doing is helping people, and having the discussions that I have, talking about what I talk about is beneficial. So that's probably been the coolest thing that has happened off the racetrack.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, you also...
I like the pun, wordplay right there.
slide it in there. You also competed on Survivor.
I did.
Why? What pushed you to do Survivor?
Well, I had the opportunity to apply, and I thought, you know what? The women who are on this show are super badass, and they, it's so competitive, and it is a game. You're competing against other people, and it's so different. And I thought, this seems like it would be dumb to pass it up. And I applied. I sent my videos in, and I got it. I totally backfired. My strategy. I ended up concealing a part of myself, and didn't let people know that I went to Stanford, and kind of got what they call the boring edit, and was perceived as vanilla, which was humbling in front of 9 million people who were watching. But I learned a lot about authenticity and self-awareness, and it's fun to look back on, and it was very challenging, and got a really bad sunburn, so sunscreen is important.
Yeah. How does the Survivor experience add to your collective experience as a NASCAR driver, as a woman in STEM? Like, did that teach you anything new about yourself?
Yeah, besides the self-awareness, I was so uncomfortable the whole time. I mean, I was the youngest person out there. I'd never been in a position where I couldn't trust anyone, and it was such a different physical environment, and it was miserable, and we were losing challenge after challenge after challenge. And the perseverance, you feel like you want to give up, and you just, you learn to persevere.
And I'm sure it must be exhausting being on an island in the heat. But what is the experience like inside of the car?
Hotter. Yeah. So if you think of a NASCAR car, the motor's in the front. And so the cockpit, which is where we sit, doesn't let a lot of air in because that would hurt the aerodynamics. And so the air just sits in the car, and the motor's right there. So it gets to be 130 degrees in the car. And we're in our full suits, we're in our helmet, you're bracing yourself and using your core and your upper body strength to steer and fight the G-forces for hours on end. So it's really an endurance sport, and you need strength, but that's why it's kind of cool, because it's not brute strength. It's not, go to failure and everything. And so women can do it against men, having naturally smaller statures. So it's so hard, though. People totally underestimate it's not driving on the highway and just turning left. It's incredibly intensive, and you lose a lot of water weight. And
you're just sweating.
Just sweating. I mean, I think they've done research that the average guy at 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", who's 160 pounds, will lose 6 to 12 pounds of water weight. I've never measured personally, but I mean, it's a lot to lose. So it's very physical, and very uncomfortable.
How long are your races typically?
Mine have been about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you feel it. And it's like when the sun's beating down, and especially if you're racing side by side with someone for a long time, you're on that much more. Whereas if you're a single file, you can kind of just focus a little more on your specific points. But if you're racing someone, it's like, are they going to pass me? Am I going to pass them? Oh, I'm getting by them. Oh, no, but they're getting by me. So it's just the mental component makes you that much more tired. So it's a lot. It's a lot of inputs coming at you.
Now, racing is also very expensive. About $3 million, am I correct?
Yeah, so basically it's millions of dollars to go racing. The top levels of NASCAR are pushing the 20 million marker, and it's closer to single digits for the development series. But it's very expensive, and it's 20 to 30 weekends a year, and if you think of tires and gas and equipment and backup cars and personnel that have to be paid and travel, it adds up.
How do you pay for all that?
So it's a mixed landscape now. So some of it's not for me personally, but for drivers out there, part of it is personal funding. Part of it is, familial business connections. There are a handful of drivers who get the support of the team, but really, for the most part, to make it in NASCAR, you have to show that you can, or you have to, provide financially to go to the team. So we're working really hard, and we've had sponsors for the past couple of years, and it's just a big step. So we're working on finalizing the funding for the 2018 season now, which is a full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah,
so,
this is another part of the
tough.
job.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest challenge in raising money for racing?
I think the biggest challenge has been articulating all the value that's in NASCAR, because it's still a very valuable sport. It's still the second most watched sport. Obviously, the landscape of how people consume sports and media is changing and is going more digital, so kind of figuring out how you fit in there. And I think a lot of people who are in decision-making positions at these companies that I'm attracting, which is different from a more traditional NASCAR sponsor, they're just less familiar with it. So having to do a lot of educating about what's there, and sometimes preconceived notions can kind of get in the way. But my manager and I work really hard to kind of show everything that's on the table and what I have to offer away from the racetrack.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, this is the most that I've ever learned about NASCAR.
Well, it's like kind of like a startup where the product is me and my racing.
Yeah.
But I have to do the fundraising and the marketing and everything.
Yeah.
So it's very much a business.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I have a great day at the keynote with your keynote speech, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.